Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're going to continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 37. Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam
Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam
Vasudevaya Dhimahi
Vasudevaya Dhimahi
Pradyumnaya Anuruddhaya
Pradhumyanaya Anuruddhaya
Nama Sankarshanaya Cha.
Sankarshanaya Namaha Cha.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Let us all chant the glories of Vasudeva, along with his plenary expansions, Pradyumna, Anirudh, and Sankarshan. According to Pancharatra, Narayan is the primeval cause of all expansions of Godhead. These are Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh. Vasudeva and Sankarshan are on the middle, left, and right. Pradyumna is on the right of Sankarshan and Anirudh is on the left of Vasudeva. And thus the four deities are situated and they are known as the four aides de camp of Lord Sri Krishna. So the Chaturvyuha expansions. Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of God. He first expands as Balaram. Then Balaram, from Balaramji come these Chaturvyuha expansions. So the Balaramji first expands as Narayan, and from Narayan comes this Chaturvyuha, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh. They're all expansions of God. This is a Vedic Hymn mantra beginning with Omkar Pranav, and thus the mantra is established by the transcendental chanting process, namely Om Namo Dhimahi, etc. So just now, what we read is a Vedic mantra. The purport is that any transaction, either in the field of fruitive work or in empiric philosophy, which is not ultimately aimed at transcendental realization of the Supreme Lord, is considered to be useless. Nāraji has therefore explained the nature of unalloyed devotional service by his personal experience in the development of intimacy between the Lord and the living entity by a gradual process of progressive devotional activities. Such a progressive march of transcendental devotion for the Lord culminates in the attainment of loving service of the Lord, which is called prema, in different transcendental variegatedness called rasa, taste. Such devotional service is also executed in mixed forms, namely mixed with fruitive work or empiric philosophical speculations. So Narad Muni, he's quoting this mantra, he's chanting this mantra, and here Prabhupada is saying that any work, it could be any karma or any kind of philosophy or theory, any puja, any kind of a duty, they should all come to bring us to the point to understand who is God, that Lord Sri Krishna, Lord Narayan is God. So that's the purpose of doing any activity, performing our duties well, or any theories or philosophizing, or any of the karma kand activities, to understand God. So there can be a gradual elevation of our consciousness. So Narad Muni, he's explaining by his own personal experience. He was a small boy. He associated with the Vedantes. the great devotees of the Lord. He served them. He had their remnants. Then he got a desire to hear from them. And gradually, how he became a pure devotee. So he's explaining by his personal example that this process works. How we can see the efficacy of a medicine, it works, no? Something works, people take it, the medicine works. So devotional service works. And Narad Muni is saying by his own example. So it may be gradual, as we are saying, there's a gradual progress. If progress is gradually, the devotion for the Lord. But yes, the goal is prema, and one will revive one's love for God. So devotional service initially, when we begin, then we have also other desires. We may have material desires, we may have desire for liberation, but at least begin it some way or the other. We may not be able to come to pure devotional service immediately in the beginning. That's okay. At least there is a beginning. Just like a child, he can't speak initially. So he learns, small little words, one word. And then when he hears enough, he learns enough, then he speaks. Now the question which was raised by the great rishis, headed by Shaunak, regarding the confidential part of Sutta's achievement through the spiritual master is explained herein by chanting of this hymn consisting of 33 letters. And this mantra is addressed to the four deities or the Lord with his plenary expansions. The central figure is Lord Sri Krishna because the plenary portions are his aides de camp. The most confidential part of the instruction is that one should always chant and remember the glories of the Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with his different plenary portions expanded as Vāsadeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh. These expansions are the original deities for all other truths, namely either Vishnu Tattva or Shakti Tattvas. So here Prabhupada is saying how we understand the mantra, the meaning of the mantra, that always hear and chant about the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, his glories, his names, and along with Anirudh, Pradyum, Sankarshan, Vāsadeva. So this is what Narad Muni is saying here. Always hear and chant about the Supreme Lord with his associates. So going on. Iti murti abhidhanena
इति मुत्य अभिधानेन
mantra murti amurtikam
मंत्रमूर्तिरम अमूर्तिकम्
yajate yakhya purusham
यजते यज्ञपुरुषं
sa samyak darshanapaman.
सः सर्मर्क दर्शनः पुमान.
Would somebody like to read?
Yeah, I can read.
Okay, thank you.
Translation. Thus, he is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who has no material form. Purport. Our present senses are all made of material elements, and therefore they are imperfect in realizing the transcendental form of Lord Vishnu. He is therefore worshipped by sound representation via the transcendental method of chanting. Anything which is beyond the scope of experience by our imperfect senses can be realized fully by the sound representation. A person transmitting sound from a far distant place can be factually experienced. If this is materially possible, why not spiritually? This experience is not a vague, impersonal experience. It is actually an experience of the transcendental personality of Godhead, who possesses the pure form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge.
So God, he has a form, but his form is spiritual, not material. Sat Chit Ananda. Now he has a spiritual form, but our senses are material right now. We are covered by the material body. So we are not able to see him. We can't, for example, there's so many bacteria in front of us. We can't even see them. When we have suitable lens, suitable microscope, then we can see them. So because we can't see them, doesn't mean they don't exist. When we have suitable lens, we can see. Similarly, God has a form, a spiritual form. So how can we get information about him? By hearing about him. Just like we have said before, okay, radio was there to tell us about faraway places, faraway news, what's happening. It's via sound we could hear. We couldn't see it, but we could hear, oh, in this country that's happening, oh, this is happening there, that's happening there, by hearing, even though we were not there personally to see it. So then, this is what's been given. So how can we understand God? By hearing about him from the authorities, from Bhagavad Gita, from Bhagavatam.
In the Amarakosha Sanskrit dictionary, the word murti carries import in twofold meanings, namely form and difficulty. Therefore, Amurtikam is explained by Acharya Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura as meaning without difficulty. The transcendental form of eternal bliss and knowledge can be experienced by our original spiritual senses, which can be revived by chanting of the holy mantras or transcendental sound representations. Such sound should be received from the transparent agency of the bona fide spiritual master, and chanting may be practiced by the direction of the spiritual master that will gradually lead us nearer to the Lord. This method of worship is recommended in the Pancharika system, which is both recognized and authorized. The Pancharatrika system has the most authorized codes for transcendental devotional service. Without the help of such codes, one cannot approach the Lord, certainly not by dry philosophical speculation. The Pancharatrika system is both practical and suitable for this age of quarrel. The Pancharatra is more important than the Vedanta for this modern age.
So the worship of the Lord is given in the Pancharatrika, and it is appropriate for us. See, worship of God, we cannot just worship according to our imagination. We have to follow the authorities. And following the authority. Like for anything, we want to learn about anything. We say we want to become a doctor. We have to learn from the medical school, the medical teachers. We cannot imagine anything and say, okay, now I became a doctor. No, we follow. So similarly, worship of the Supreme Lord is mentioned in Pancharatrika, and we follow those codes, follow those rules and regulations. So Murti, here Acharya Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying without difficulty. Amurtikam. Amurtikam is without difficulty. Murti is namely form and difficulty, and amurtikam without difficulty. So, So God, He has a spiritual form, Satchit Ananda. And right now our senses are covered. We have spiritual senses. We are spirit soul, so we have spiritual senses. But just as our soul is covered by this material body, our spiritual senses are covered by the material senses. So how can we be able to see this spiritual form of the Lord? We have to revive our original spiritual senses. And how they can be revived? By chanting the mantras, transcendental sound representation. And the mantra which we have been given for this age of Kali in the Vedas and the Shastras is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Now, how should we receive this mantra? Should be received from the bona fide representative. Should be received in the parampara. So this will help us to understand God more and more. It will help us to spiritualize our senses more and more. And Prabhupada has mentioned that this method is mentioned in the Pancharatrika, and we follow it. So we can understand that God realization is not something imaginary. No, there are ways. It's given how to do it. We are being advised, hear and chant. Hear from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Like this, remember the Lord and worship the Lord. Worship the deity of the Lord. So our senses, which are right now are covered, we can revive them again, spiritualize them again. Imam Swa Nigamam Brahman.
Imam Swa Nigamam Brahman.
Avetya Mad Anushtitam.
Avetya Mad Anustitam.
Adan Me Jnanam Aishwaryam.
Adan Me Jnanam Aishwaryam.
Swasmin Bhavam Cha Keshava.
Swasmin Bhavam Cha Keshava. Translation. O Brahmana, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna, I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord as inculcated in the confidential paths of the Vedas, then with the spiritual opulences, and then with his intimate loving service. Purport. Communion with the Lord by transmission of the transcendental sound is non-different from the whole spirit Lord Sri Krishna. It is a completely perfect method for approaching the Lord. By such pure contact with the Lord, without offense of material conceptions, numbering 10, the devotee can rise above the material plane to understand the inner meaning of the Vedic literatures, including the Lord's existence in the transcendental realm. The Lord reveals his identity gradually to one who has unflinching faith both in the spiritual master and in the Lord. After this, the devotee is endowed with mystic opulences, which are 8 in number. And above all, the devotee is accepted in the confidential entourage of the Lord and is entrusted with specific service of the Lord through the agency of the spiritual master. A pure devotee is more interested in serving the Lord than in showing an exhibition of the mystic powers dormant in him. Sri Nārada has explained all these from his personal experience, and one can obtain all the facilities which Sri Nārada obtained by perfecting the chanting process of the sound representation of the Lord. There is no bar for chanting this transcendental sound by anyone, provided it is received through Narada's representative, coming down by the chain of disciplic succession or the parampara system.
Nārada Muni is saying that the result of chanting is able to approach the Lord, he's able to serve the Lord. He's able to revive his spiritual identity by chanting. And he's speaking from personal experience. He himself did it, and so he's personal example of it. That he's able to see the Lord face to face because he chanted. Chanting without offense. So there are 10 offenses to the chanting of the holy name. And so chanting carefully without offenses, Prabhupada is saying the devotee can understand the Supreme Lord. He'll be able to gradually be able to see the Lord. He'll be able to understand the Lord. He will be able to see the Lord. He'll be able to reciprocate with the Lord. And all this is happening gradually under the guidance of the spiritual master, who's a representative of Krishna. So he gets the service. He also gets these mystic powers. But the devotee, he's not very, his focus is not to get mystic powers. His focus is to serve Krishna, to be in this loving relationship with Krishna. So Narad Muni also got all this. And Prabhupada is saying that one can get all these facilities which Narad Muni got if we follow his instruction. Narad Muni got this by chanting. So if we follow the instruction of Narad Muni, we can also get it. And receive it through Narad's representative, means receiving it in the disciplic succession, in the parampara. Vamapi abhadra shruta vishrutam vibho.
Tvam api adhapra shruta vishrutam vibho.
Samapyate yena vedam babhutsitam.
Samapyate yena vidambu pushitam.
Sakya hi dukkher muhur ardidatmanam.
Prakya hi dukkher muhur arditamanam.
Sanklesha nirvanamushanti nanyatha.
Sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyata. Translation. Please, therefore, describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankering of great learned men and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of the common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. Purport. Sri Narada Muni, from practical experience, definitely asserts that the prime solution of all problems of material work is to broadcast very widely the transcendental glories of the Supreme Lord. There are 4 classes of good men, and there are 4 classes of bad men also. The 4 classes of good men acknowledge the authority of the Almighty God, and therefore such good men, first, when they are in difficulty; second, when they are in need of money; third, when they are advanced in knowledge; and fourth, when they are inquisitive to know more and more about God. Intuitively take shelter of the Lord. As such, Naraji advises Vyāsadeva to broadcast the transcendental knowledge of God in terms of the vast Vedic knowledge, which he had already attained.
So Narad Muni is telling now directly to Vyāsadeva that, you see, you're feeling not very good. You're feeling still dissatisfied because you have not dedicated any one scripture which is speaking about the glories of the Lord, the activities of the Lord. And you know the glories of the Lord. You know his activities. Now you write about this. And this is how you can mitigate the miseries of everyone. You can help them. Because it's only by hearing about the Lord, by chanting about him, that we can actually get rid of our misery. We are trying to make solutions, material solutions to our material problems. We may find a temporary solution, but then there are other problems keep coming. The problems don't stop. So what shall we do? Take shelter of hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord. So Narad Muni is telling to Vyasadeva, you facilitate that so that everyone can become peaceful. He's saying that here Prabhupada is mentioning, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the 4 classes of pious men who come to him. When someone is in difficulty, need of money, advanced in knowledge, inquisitive, more about God. So they have this natural inclination to come to Krishna. So Narad Muni is telling Vyasadeva, you write the glories of the Lord.
As far as the bad men are concerned, they are also 4 in number. First, those who are simply addicted to the mode of progressive fruitative work and thus are subjected to the accompanying miseries. Second, those who are simply addicted to the vicious work for sense satisfaction and so suffer the consequence. Third, those who are materially very much advanced in knowledge, but who suffer because they do not have the sense to acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord. And fourth, the class of men who are known as atheists and who therefore purposely hate the very name of Lord, although they are always in difficulty.
So Prabhupada is mentioning here the 4 types of pious people. Somebody who's in distress, somebody who wants money, somebody who's inquisitive, one who is advanced in knowledge. They come to Supreme Lord. Like difficulty, we have the example Gajendra, need of money, Dhruv Maharaj, he wanted a big kingdom. Advanced in knowledge are the 4 Kumaras. Inquisitive are the sages of Naimisharanya. So now Prabhupada is mentioning what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the 4 kind of people who never come to him, that they just want to work so hard and they think there's nothing else beyond this, just working. They think there's nothing else beyond work. So one who is addicted to sinful activities, one who has really so much knowledge that they say that because I have so much knowledge, they're not able to admit that there's someone greater than them. And then there is the atheist who simply don't want to accept the existence of the Supreme Lord, who Prabhupada is saying purposely hate the very name of God, although they are in difficulty.
Sri Nārada advised Vyāsadeva to describe the glories of the Lord, just to do good to all 8 classes of men, both good and bad. Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore not meant for any particular class of men or sect. It is for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. Thus end Bhaktivedanta purports of the fifth canto, fifth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Nārada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyāsadeva.
First canto, and it's the first canto, fifth chapter.
First
So here
canto.
Narad Muni is telling Vyasadeva to do good to everyone, to the pious and to the impious. Everyone, because everyone's suffering. Everyone is in misery. So Srimad Bhagavatam is not for any one particular sect, one particular class. No, it's meant for anyone, everyone. For one who wants to become peaceful, who wants to become who wants to become free from anxiety, one who wants to become free from fear. So anyone and everyone, Bhagavatam is recommended. Prabhupada is saying it's for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare, one who understands what's good for him. For him, Bhagavatam is recommended. So for everyone. So this brings us to the end of the fifth chapter. And then there's conversation between Nārada and Vyāsadeva in chapter 6. Sutta Vacha.
Sutta Uvacha.
Evam Nishamya Bhagavan.
Evam Shamya Bhagavan.
Devarshir Janma Karma Cha.
Devarshir Janma Karma Cha.
Bhuya Praprachatam Brahman.
Bhuya Paprachatam Brahman.
Vyasa Satyavati Sutta.
Vyasa Satyavati Sutta. Translation. Sutta said, O Brahmanas, thus hearing all about Sri Narada's birth and activities, Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God and son of Satyavati, inquired as follows. Purport. Vyasadeva was further inquisitive to know about the perfection of Naraji, and therefore he wanted to know about him more and more. In this chapter, Naraji will describe how he was able to have a brief audience with the Lord while he was absorbed in the transcendental thought of separation from the Lord, and when it was very painful for him.
So Vyasadeva he wants to know more. Vyasa Vacha.
Vyasa Uvacha.
Bhikshubhir Vasite.
Bhikshubir Vipravashite.
Vijnanadeshtribhistava.
Vikyanya na Desh Prishtava.
Vartamano Vayasi Adye.
Vartamano Vayasya Adhe.
Tata Kim Akarod Bhavan.
Tatha Kim Akarod Bhavan. Translation. Sri Vyasadeva said, what did you, Narada, do after the departure of the great sages who had instructed you in the scientific transcendental knowledge before the beginning of your present birth? Purport. Vyasadeva himself was a disciple of Naraji, and therefore it was natural to be anxious to hear what Narada did after initiation from the spiritual masters. He wanted to follow in Narada's footsteps in order to attain to the same perfect stage of life. This desire to inquire from the spiritual master is an essential factor to the progressive path. The process is technically known as Sat Dharma Pracha.
Oh, he wanted to hear from his spiritual master that, oh, what did you do? So that he can also follow the footsteps, you know, being clear, asking questions to understand, oh, what am I supposed to do? What did you do? Not imitating, not blind following, but sincere inquiry. Swayambhuva kaya vritya
Swa- Swayam Kaya Swayambhuva Kaya Vritya
vartitam te param vayaha
Vartitam Te Param Vayaha
katham chedam udas rakshe
Katham Katham Chedam Udhar Shakshi
kale prapte kalevaram.
Kale Prapte Kalevaram. Translation. O son of Brahma, how did you pass your life after initiation? And how did you attain this body, having quit your old one in due course? Purport. Sri Narada Muni, in his previous life, was just an ordinary maid servant's son. So, how he became so perfectly transformed into the spiritual body of eternal life, bliss, and knowledge is certainly important. Sri Vyasadeva desired him to disclose the facts for everyone's satisfaction.
So Narad Muni, ordinary boy before, now he's become a spiritual, he's revived his spiritual identity, he's revived his spiritual body. So it's amazing, no? So Vyasadeva wants to know. Prakalpa Vishayam Etam
Prakalpa Vishayam Etam
Smritim Te Muni Sattama
Mritam Te Muni Sattama
Nahi Esha Vyavadhat Kal
Nahi Esha Vyavadhat Kala
Esha Sarva Nirakriti.
Esha Sarva Nirakriti. Translation. O great sage, time annihilates everything in due course. So how is it that the subject matter which happened prior to this day of Brahma is still fresh in your memory, undisturbed by time? Purport. As spirit is not annihilated even after the annihilation of the material body, so also spiritual consciousness is not annihilated. Sri Narada developed this spiritual consciousness even when he had his material body in the previous kalpa. Consciousness of the material body means spiritual consciousness expressed through the medium of a material body. This consciousness is inferior, destructible, and perverted. But superconsciousness of the supramind in the spiritual plane is as good as the spirit soul and is never annihilated.
So Vyasadeva is saying, how you remember? We can't even remember something that happens yesterday, no? A few hours before. Now Vyasadeva is saying, this happened in previous day of Brahma. Previous day of Brahma means 1000 Satyo, Treta, Dwapar and Kalyu combined together. And no, 2000 because one that's just 12 hours and then comes the night. So this is the previous day, previous kalpa. So then how did you remember? So Prabhupada is here explaining the soul is eternal, spiritual. So similarly, consciousness, spiritual consciousness is also never annihilated, is eternal. So Narad Muni had already revived his spiritual consciousness when he was a little boy. And then Prabhupada is explaining what is material consciousness. Actually, pure consciousness, everyone is. has spiritual consciousness. It's just simply covered now. And what's the covering? We are thinking we are the body. So we are eternally conscious, can never give up this consciousness. Only when it gets perverted, we think we are the body. And the real consciousness is to be Krishna conscious, the pure consciousness, without any contamination, to understand I'm part and parcel of God. I have an eternal loving relationship with God, engaging in God's service. So that is eternal. Consciousness is eternal. Mm. So Narada Vachan,
Narada Uvacha
Bhikshubhir Vipravasite,
Bhikshu Bhir Vipra Vashite
Vijnana Deshtribhir Mama,
Vijnana Deshtrubhir Mama
Vartamano Vayasi Adye,
Vartamano Vayase Adiye
Tat Etad Akarasham.
Tad Ekat Akar Akarasham. Translation. Sri Narada said, the great sages who had imparted scientific knowledge of transcendence to me departed for other places, and I had to pass my life in this way. Purpose. In his previous life, when Naraji was impregnated with spiritual knowledge by the grace of the great sages, there was a tangible change in his life, although he was only a boy of 5 years. That is an important symptom visible after initiation by the bona fide spiritual master. Actual association of devotees brings about a quick change in life for spiritual realization. How it is so acted upon the previous life of Sri Narada Muni is described by and by in this chapter.
So the association of devotees, brought such a big change. Mm. So Prabhupada is saying after one gets initiated, there's a big change. So actual change, actual association of devotees helps one really in spiritual life, association of devotees. Ekatmaja me janani,
Ekatmaja me janani
yoshin muda chakinkari,
yoshin mudha chakinkari
mai atmaje nanyagato,
mai atmaje nanyan gato
chakre snehanubandhanam.
chakre snehanubandhanam. Translation. I was the only son of my mother, who was not only a simple woman, but a maid servant as well. Since I was her only offspring, she had no other alternative for protection. She bound me with the tie of affection.
So he was the only one that she had. She had nothing else, no one else. So she was very attached to him. Sasva, Sasvatantra na kalpase,
Shashvatantra na kalpashe
Yogashemam mamechati,
yogashemam mamachate
Ishasya hi vashe loko,
ishasya hi vaise loko
Yosha darumai yatha.
yosha darumai yatha. Translation: She wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for me. The world is under the full control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of a puppet master.
With such a small boy, he could understand that everyone is under the control of the Supreme Lord. We are thinking we are independent, but each of us, we are either under the spiritual energy or material energy. Aham cha tad brahma kule
Aham cha tat brahmakule
ush shivam tad upekshaya
ushimam tat upekshaya
digdesha kala yutpano
digdesha kalavya yutpano
balaka panchahayanaha.
balaka panchahayanaha. Translation: When I was a mere child of 5 years, I lived in a Brahmana school. I was dependent on my mother's affection and had no experience of different lands.
So he was just living with his mother where she was working. He was just a small, simple boy. Ekada nirgatam geha
Ekadha nirgatam geha
duhantim nishigam pathi
duhantim nishigam pati
sarpo dashat padasprishtha
tapodashat pada prishta
krip, kripanam kalachodita.
kripanam kalachodita. Translation: Once upon a time, my poor mother, when going out one night to milk a cow, was on bitten on the leg by a serpent, influenced by supreme time. That is the way of dragging a sincere soul nearer to God. That's the way of dragging a sincere soul nearer to God. The poor boy was being looked after only by his affectionate mother, and yet the mother was taken from the world by the supreme will in order to put him completely at the mercy of the Lord.
So she had only him and he had only her. And now she's dying. Tada tad aham ishasya
Tada tat aham ishasya
bhaktanam sham abhipsata.
bhaktanam sham abhipsatah
Anugraham manyamana
anugraham manyamanah
pratishtham disham uttaram.
prathishtam disham uttaram. Translation: I took this as the special mercy of the Lord, who always desires benediction for his devotees, and so thinking, I started for the north. Purport: Confidential devotees of the Lord see in every step a benedictory direction of the Lord. What is considered to be an odd or difficult moment in the mundane sense is accepted as special mercy of the Lord. Mundane prosperity is a kind of material fever, and by the grace of the Lord, the temperature of this material fever is gradually diminished, and spiritual health is obtained step by step. Mundane people misunderstand it.
So he is understanding it as the mercy of the Lord to help him become completely dependent on the Lord, take complete shelter of the Lord. The pure devotees, they see the hand of the Lord. In any reversal, they understand it and so they can take more shelter, take deeper shelter. Svitanjana padamstatra
Fitan Janapadamstatra
Puragram Rajakaran
Puragram Vrajakaran
Khet Karvat Vatischa
Ketukarvatischa
Manani Upmanani cha.
Vanani Upvanani cha. Translation. After my departure, I passed through many flourishing metropolises, towns, villages, animal farms, mines, agricultural lands, valleys, flower gardens, nursery gardens, and natural forests. Purport. Man's activities in agriculture, mining, farming, industries, gardening, etc., were all on the same scale as they are now, even previous to the present creation, and the same activities will remain as they are even in the next creation. After many hundreds of millions of years, one creation started by the law of nature, and the history of the universe repeats itself practically in the same way. The mundane wranglers waste time with archaeological excavations without searching into the vital necessities of life. After getting an impetus in spiritual life, Sri Narada Muni, even though a mere child, did not waste time for a single moment with economic development, although he passed towns and villages, mines and industries. He continually went on to progressive spiritual emancipation. Srimad Bhagavatam is the is a repetition of history which happened some hundreds of millions of years ago. As it is said herein, only the most important factors of history are picked up to be recorded in this transcendental literature.
So Prabhupada is pointing out here, Narad Muni is saying he passed through different mines, through farms, towns, villages, cities, valleys, so many forests. So Prabhupada is saying it's not that it's only now that we have mining, agriculture, farming, industry. Everything was there before also. In this is the previous creation. And if we have it now, it will continue in the next creation too. So here, the Prabhupada is pointing out that Narad Muni, he didn't waste his time. He didn't say, okay, I'm going to, do some mining or some agriculture or some business. No, but he was in his spiritual journey. He went on with that. So Bhagavatam is a repetition of history which happened some hundreds of millions of years ago. So what we are hearing in Bhagavatam, these are actual facts. These have happened. And the most important facts that have happened, they have been mentioned here in Bhagavatam. That's why Bhagavatam is transcendental, all to do with devotees, with the Supreme Lord, with devotion, with the Lord's incarnations. So it's completely transcendental. So we'll stop here for today. Did anyone want to add any comment or any question? Okay. Thank you so much for joining in and listening in. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.